Hello and happy General Election Day. I hope you've already voted or have plans to vote or aren't in the UK, in which case, happy Thursday. Now, I wasn't quite sure what to do today in terms of a video. Didn't have a huge amount of time, wasn't quite sure how to sum up the mood of a nation. But then I saw an article by Allister Heath. He's a writer in the Daily Telegraph. And basically, he was sort of giving a description of what he thinks that the next Labour government might look like and what our lives will all look like under a Labour government. And I think it's fair to say he's not a huge fan. And when I saw it, I found it very, very funny. I, in fact, even commented on the article saying, "Thank you, you've given me a great laugh." But I thought, maybe I should do sort of a parody of it or something. That's what I would normally do. But I realised it's actually almost too insane to parody. So instead, what I'm going to do today is just read out what he's written in the tone and style that I think was in his head when he wrote it. So sit back, relax, enjoy Allister Heath on the next Labour government.
The UK is about to enter a nightmare, far darker than anyone yet realises. I hope you enjoy horror films, dear readers, for British politics is about to be turned into an infernal, soul-destroying hellscape worthy of the sickest of Hollywood minds. The next few years won't be merely a little bit worse, as many delusional voters of a centre-right persuasion have sought to convince themselves. The imminent Labour ascendancy will be truly calamitous. Every Conservative nightmare will come true, and more besides. The left-wing stormtroopers who are about to seize the keys to number 10 will enjoy almost unimaginable power and will be far more competent at wielding it to annihilate their enemies than the Tories ever were. Consider the following all too possible apocalyptic scenario. On Friday morning, we could wake up to not just the greatest Labour landslide in history, but also to the Liberal Democrats as the official opposition. It would represent the Conservative Party's greatest humiliation since its foundation in 1834. Sir Keir Starmer, as Labour Prime Minister, would face the clownish Ed Davey of Post Office scandal fame as leader of the opposition at Prime Minister's questions. The Tory leader, whoever he or she may end up being, would be left with two questions at the end of the session, by which time most viewers would have lost interest. The Shadow Chancellor would be a Lib Dem. With Labour massively ahead in every poll, the real race is for second place in terms of seats in the House of Commons, and it could be nail-bitingly close, thanks to the Conservative Party's epic implosion. Servation, the pollster, believes that there is only a 53% chance the Tories will end up with more seats than the Lib Dems, a perishingly small margin of error. YouGov predicts that the Tories will just be 30 seats ahead of Davies' rabble. Even if the Tories do edge it by a few seats, say 10 or 15, their status as the official opposition and the funding and privileges that come with it would remain extremely precarious. The likely scale of the defeat will be crushing for remaining Tory MPs. Former top ministers will become obscure non-entities overnight. They will lose their ministerial cars and special advisors, and many will become the butt of jokes. Nobody will care what they say or do. Few will even return their calls. The blame game will be savage. The Tory party will tear itself apart, perhaps even realising, finally, that it can no longer be the home of both left-wing, high-tax, woke Grenaders and right-wing, low-tax, anti-woke Brexiteers. Some Tory MPs may join the Lib Dems, and others defect to Reform UK, further diminishing the party's parliamentary numbers, potentially jeopardising its status as the official opposition. Or take another scenario. what if a bunch of disillusioned Labour MPs eventually decide to quit their gargantuan group and join the Lib Dems instead? The Lib Dems could suddenly overtake the reduced Tory rump. The Conservative parliamentary group will need to be much larger than the Lib Dem one if they are to be confident that they can stay the official opposition for the remainder of the next parliament. If the Lib Dems were to overtake the Tories in terms of seats on Friday, the implication would be that the combined centre-right parties, Tory, Reform, and Northern Ireland Unionists, would account for just 10% of the total in the House of Commons, with 90% of MPs explicitly left-wing. Unprecedented imbalance. Britain's system of parliamentary checks and balances would thus lie in tatters, and we would effectively become a one-party state, or at least a state where almost every politician thinks in exactly the same way. Lib Dems, after all, tend to be left-wingers who find it easier for industrial or cultural reasons in places such as Surrey to be elected under a yellow rather than a red rosette. The Tories would be hammered when it came to the allocation of select committee positions. The Public Accounts Committee would automatically be chaired by Lib Dems. What would pass for parliamentary scrutiny would amount to airing left-wing grievances on repeat. Starmer would be attacked for not spending enough, for not rejoining the EU, for not punishing Israel for fighting evil terrorists, for not hiking taxes. Centre-right and free market voices and positions would be almost entirely absent. What is left of the Tory right and Nigel Farage and his small number of Reform MPs would do their best, but they would be shouting from the outside in. As far as the civil service would be concerned, the Overton window would have slammed shut, and the views of millions safely ignored. Ditto the BBC. If you think the broadcasters are too left-wing today, be aware it could be far worse were the Lib Dems to become the opposition. Question Time would end up pitting a Labour MP against a Lib Dem, with Tories regularly excluded. Airtime balance on TV and the radio would consist in various shades of left-wing opinion, with an occasional Tory or Reform panellist screamed down by everyone else. Labour, cheered on by the supposed Lib Dem opposition, would be emboldened to move faster and further in a socialist and woke direction. It would seek to leverage the Equality Act to conscript every company in the fight against social inequality via positive discrimination. It would double down on net zero and the war on cars. It would start copying EU rules just for the sake of it. It would find it much easier to jack up taxes in its first budget, including on wealth, inheritance, and property. It would turn a blind eye to illegal immigration and would gradually further increase legal immigration, egged on by radical open border activists within the left's parliamentary ranks. The best that can be hoped for now is that the Tories become the official opposition. Can that really be too much to ask?
Now, I don't know about you, but most of that sounds pretty good to me. See you in the nightmare.